our hope, our goal for today is that you walk away with some strategies and some activities to help your child to navigate through those ups and downs of everyday life. Didn't get what I wanted, didn't get enough sleep, wasn't able to make a good connect somewhere, and just to kind of have those ideas and strategies to make your day a little bit easier, make their day a little bit easier. We're going to start out with talking about the whole point of our journey. Move closer, can you not hear me? Oh, there we go. Basically, we're hoping that our children are thriving and flourishing. I don't know about you, but for my kids, I hope that they're healthy and they're happy and they're making friends. Those are my biggest things for my kids, and everything else is a bonus. But when that's not happening, that's a pretty tough day. So those are the things that we're hoping to touch on today and give you some strategies for. In order to learn, to work, to play properly, it's just have a good day, have a fun day, you have to be in that just right place. You have to have the just right amount of challenge and be in that just right place. So what do we mean by that, and why does our little guy have a flowing green thing? Well, a lot of times when I start talking about sensory systems or about your just right place, I usually use a bucket. I have this really, really fancy tool that I use. I use this with the kids a lot of times to show them. But this is kind of that bucket within ourselves that, we have to have just enough information to get up and get moving and get our day done, but not too much information where we're overwhelmed, but not too little information where we're falling asleep and not engaged. So we have 8 sensory systems that feed into our bucket, and I'll go over those in a little bit. And basically, all of us, from birth to death, are a sensory processing machine. So we're taking in that information, we're processing it, and it's affecting our ability to go through our daily life, all the ups and downs of the day. That bucket also holds not just the sensory, but all those things that happen in our day, our stressors, our frustrations, our worries, those times where we had a plan and it didn't go as planned. I don't know about you, but that's most of my days. So all of those things fill or empty our bucket. So when we talk about our bucket and talk about overflow, we talk about those sensory systems. There's actually 8, and if any of you have seen any of our sensory awareness program things, we have this little Ollie the octopus who has 8 legs, so 8 legs, 8 sensory systems. We learn about 5 of them as kids. When we're in preschool and kindergarten: sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. So those are the ones that everybody kind of knows and recognizes. As OTs, we look at 3 other ones as well, pretty in-depthly. One is movement. We call it our vestibular sense, and this is our sense of, when you go to the mall and it says you are here, this is that system. It tells you where you are in your space. It tells you if you're going forward, backwards, upside down, moving fast, moving slow. We also have what's called a proprioceptive system. That kind of gives you your body map. All of you are sitting, your knees are bent, maybe your legs are crossed, maybe your ankles are or feet are on the floor, ankles are bent. You don't have to look at your body. You know exactly where it is. So it's that sense of knowing where your body is. It's a sense of knowing how much pressure to put on something. If there's a cup on the table and you want to take a drink, if it's a paper cup, you're going to grab it gently and take a drink. The juice boxes that they squeeze, exactly. Or for kids that are at an age where they're writing, it's that paper pencil pressure. Pushing too hard and snapping all the crayons or the pencils, or pushing too lightly and you can't read it. So that's what that sense is. And then the last sense that we have is that sense of interoception, awareness of what's going on inside. Am I hungry? Am I full? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Do I have to go now and I need to run out of the room? How's my heart rate? How's my respiratory rate? So all of those things are going on, and we're processing all that, and depending on how much or how little we take in that input, we're managing that. And then we have to also manage all the rest of our day. So some kids have fine motor, like handwriting things, so those are difficult. So that adds an additional stressor and kind of starts to fill our bucket a little bit more full. Some kids have motor planning things, or just a little bit of a clumsy kiddo or awkward kiddo, and so that fills their bucket if they go to gym class or go to the playground. So those are a lot of the things that we do. And so as we go through our day, we talk about filling our bucket. So our goal is green, but if we start to overfill our bucket, we get in the caution zone or the red zone. And so we'll talk more about those. But Megan's going to talk about some of the things that are everyday stressors that also overfill our bucket. Thanks.
So I think we're all in this room with Nicole giving us the sort of warning that if your kid's in childcare and they need to go to the bathroom, there's going to be a little interruption or something like that. It really doesn't bother me if I see somebody come over and say, oh, your son needs to go to the bathroom, you mind me? That I don't register as a transition or a change. I think that we all kind of have different thresholds for what we register as a transition or a change. And some of the kids that we work with who might maybe have like an autism diagnosis, and there's a big sensory component to that, transitions are difficult to manage. If there's somebody coming in and out of the classroom, or a lot of times families will talk about like, I think my kid doesn't like me because when I come home from work or when my partner comes home from work, the kid all of a sudden melts down. And it may not be that they don't like you, it's more like that's a transition or that's a change in the household. And multiple transitions can fill up a bucket. I worked with somebody who their classroom was on energy saving lights. And so when the teacher would go into the corner of the class to read stories for circle time or whatever, there was no sensor signaling movement in the class, so the lights would go off in the classroom. The teacher would just sort of get up, wave her arms by the detector, and the lights would go back on, and she'd go back to reading. And as that kind of happened throughout the day or throughout the story, it was filling up this kid's bucket. All those changes and transitions were sort of an accumulation of irritations. Other things are, when we think about things like interruptions from a task, this is usually really interruptions from a preferred task, but if you think about a kid who maybe is engaged in what they want to be doing or what they're interested in, and they're hearing language from somebody, usually an adult, saying like, okay, we got to wrap this up, it's time to go, or questions, or some instruction for something else to do, those kinds of interruptions can accumulate too as filling up the bucket. Challenges and frustration. So we talked a lot about frustration tolerance. And some people are happy to approach a challenge. They like a challenge. They really want to work towards it. There are some kids we work with who, by the nature of maybe some, fine motor deficits, handwriting is a real challenge. And then they also have an essay that they have to write, or a paragraph they have to write about. And they've got to organize it. They've got to come up with their ideas, and they're not actually interested in whatever the topic is. And so there are more challenges in that task of writing a paragraph in the classroom for that kid than maybe for many other kids in the classroom. And as they encounter frustration, that can fill up their bucket as well. Demands, prompts, instructions, redirections, your kids would call that nagging, right? Or you might call it nagging if somebody was giving you a lot of demands and instructions and prompts and corrections and things like that. Some of our kids, by the nature of who they are, they go through their day getting corrected a lot, or getting reminded a lot, or getting instructed a lot, because they're not doing it on their own. Just walking into the library, I saw two little kids with their green bags running out of the library, and their mom, she was happy with them running ahead a little bit because they were being safe and everything, and the kid dropped his bag of books on the ground, and the mom right away said, okay, pick it up. Sometimes we give an instruction before we need to. Like, maybe that kid was going to pick up the book, but it was just this automatic adult, I'm going to give you an instruction. And those kinds of things build up for a kid who just hears chatter all day long to them. Conflict, so whether it's a peer conflict or a conflict with an adult, but just feeling like they're getting in trouble or they're running up against it, having to explain why something's important to them. Activities. So there are some people who like to be busy. There are some people who like to have activities. They've got a play date, and they're already asking you, what are we going to do when he goes home? They want to have a lot of uptime in their life. And there are some people who the worst day ever is when they go to school, and then they've got to run errands, and then they've got a piano lesson, and they've got all kinds of things like that. So sort of finding where somebody's comfortable. Are they comfortable with more downtime? Are they comfortable with more activity time? And thinking about if as you go outside of their comfort zone, whether it's too much activity or too little activity, that can fill up your bucket too. The unexpected and the unknown. So for a lot of kids with anxiety or autism spectrum disorders or just a personality where they like to know what's expected of them, situations where they just don't know what they have to do, what other people are going to do, what some kids do. If you think about a school day, there are certain teachers who are pretty structured and rigid, and you kind of understand exactly what's going to happen, and maybe the kids in the class are pretty structured too or predictable. There are certain kids who, if they're in a class like that, they do really, really well. But if throughout the day there's a lot of flexibility around them, or spontaneity, or like sometimes I refer to them as loose cannons, a kid who just sort of, you don't know why or when or where, they just laugh or they do something. Some kids feel very tense when there's that kind of, I don't know what's going on around me. And they like the world to be very predictable, and they like to know what's expected of them, and they like to know what they can expect of other people. And if they don't know how to plan for that, it can fill up their bucket. A poor fit. So I think of this a lot. I work with a lot of kids who I think they will be fine adults, but school is just kind of not their thing. And when I talk with adults in the room, you guys, if you're bored or you feel like you need to go to the bathroom or this is not really hitting what you were here hoping to hear, you're allowed to get up and walk away. You're allowed to get up and go to the bathroom. You're allowed to pull out your paper and start doodling or make a to-do list for the grocery store or something like that. And no one's going to yell at you, or no one's going to tell you to put that away or sit down or anything like that. We have kids who they have a lot of rules they need to follow at home and in school, and sometimes it's not a great fit for what their needs are in terms of movement, or maybe they're not a kid who loves to sit and listen all day and they have to do that kind of thing. So we talked about, our buckets can be empty. Maybe we're feeling bored or underwhelmed, understimulated. Where we really want to find our sweet spot is in that just right zone, where there is enough stimulation, enough challenge, enough going on that you feel just right. But our buckets can be full, and a lot of times we end up seeing kids frustrated, mad, angry, upset. They're just overwhelmed. You can tell people talk about melting down. There's just too much going on. And I think about it like somebody's bucket is spilling over. It's just pouring, and they can't contain themselves anymore in their bucket. Okay, so getting just right is also about life being balanced. We want to make sure that when we talk about fit, it can be a fit like, I'm not a kid who likes to sit and listen. It can also be the sort of thing like, I like to know what to expect, and my parent is very flexible and very spontaneous, and I just never know what we're going to end up doing that evening because she's so creative and flexible and things. Also, we talk about a fit with what you are capable of doing and what is being asked of you. So does your coping ability balance out with the demands and expectations and stressors in your life, or what you're expected to do? So what we end up in terms of developing strategies and how we address some of this is we can focus on the coping side, where we teach strategies to that individual to help them increase their coping abilities, or we can focus on the demands, expectations, and stressors side. And of course, on that side of the scale, we're really looking at how do we decrease those demands, expectations, stressors. If we're talking about a kid having to, color inside the lines, and that's not a kid who's got necessarily the best fine motor skills and they're not going to be able to color inside the lines, maybe we remove or lessen that expectation and maybe we do a little work on the fine motor stuff too to help them reach those expectations. So we can work on both sides of the scale at once as well. When coping and demands when your coping abilities are less than the demands and expectations and stressors, of course you're going to have a difficult time meeting those expectations. that may result in frustration, it could result in sadness, it could result in acting out, but it usually results in problems. Underwhelmed kids, if they are, what we hear is sometimes, they're bored, or they find stuff to do to get themselves in trouble. They might feel unengaged or like disconnected. I see older kids, I'm talking about teenagers, I'll hear them saying like, they just feel kind of blah. Like it just feels like they're sort of going through the motions, there's no real connection or nothing that really gives them a spark. And that's some of that sort of underwhelmed. But a lot of times we see sort of anger or, they're acting out, kind of trying to create a little interest in their life, They do things to stimulate themselves, and that ends up in trouble, so they're picking on somebody in the classroom, or they're creating some sort of conflict maybe, or seeking out some sensory input, tackling, or those kinds of things that we hear about a lot.
So when we're looking at the coping abilities as well as the demands, we want to, ideally, this is where we want our life, right? We want our life in this really nice balance, so that what you're able to handle is what you're being challenged with. Doesn't happen through a lot of our days. All the things that we're talking about, the other thing I wanted to say as Megan was talking is, keep in mind, these are the same things for us. So being aware of where we are in handling the demands of our day. Most of us are pulled in many, many different directions. Lots of stressors come up through the day. So keeping in tune with where are your coping skills and where is that level of demand hitting you, and are some of these things strategies that you need too. I know usually as moms, dads, caregivers, we don't really take even a moment to just rest, and yet we're telling our kids, okay, take a minute and take a deep breath. And I don't know how often in the day that I do that. Take a moment and take a deep breath. So as we go through strategies, keep in mind that these are for all of us. This isn't just for kids. So real important to find that balance of keeping ourselves in tune. So one thing that we can do when we get started is what we call preparing the field, okay? Some of the key things for preparing the field: sleep. So many kiddos do not sleep well. They don't fall asleep well. They wake up during the night. If they're waking up during the night, you're not sleeping well. If they're not going to sleep well, you're not sleeping well. So it affects everybody. It affects your coping ability because you're tired, and it affects their coping ability because they're tired. So that's a big key component. So focusing on how much sleep are they really getting, and what else can we do to help that sleep piece. Nutrition. We have a lot of picky eaters out there these days. Missing whole food groups. So that's another piece that's really important to take a look at. How can you help your child to eat more foods, eat different foods? There's lots of fun strategies. There's feeding groups and there's OTs that work on that. There's speech therapists that work on it. So if there's something going on with your child, just keep in mind, do some activities. There's a couple strategies I'll go over later, but that is really a key component. If you're missing that, that hangry Snickers commercial, prime example. You're just not yourself. So whatever else comes at you, you are not going to handle it well. Demand-free periods. When Megan and I first were putting this together, I was thinking of free time, having that time to come home and not have to do something right away. Come home, put your book away, and then have that 30 minutes of downtime, which it is that, but it is also something different. As we were talking, it is that time frame of nobody is asking anything of you, is maybe even asking you questions. She had a perfect example of a student that she had worked with that just needed, barely made it through the day, and then was one of those kids comes home, and so getting in the car and having mom just ask, how was your day? Who'd you eat lunch with? How'd it go? What was nice for you? That was too much. And so that kind of a demand for you. Even your kind questions for your child about, I'm just interested in your life. Sometimes they can't answer those questions right now, and they're like, hold off. And so they came up with a really neat scheme of a necklace you made, right? Mm-hmm. That, said, yes, I'm ready to talk about stuff, or no, I'm not. And so she could put it on and go, I'm not ready. So the mom knew, okay, I'm going to put the music on, and we're going to drive home, and we'll get home, and when you flip the necklace, if you're ready, you've got a little, then we can do it. And what a wonderful way to give control back to the child for what you were saying before, if you're doodling, it's okay, but if they're doodling in school, it's not. It was such a nice opportunity for this child to say, I need a minute. Because a lot of times we don't let them say that. We're like, that's nice, but we gotta go. And we're just busy. So I think that is super important. And then time for fun. there just doesn't seem to be a lot of downtime for kids. I mean, for the most part, there is so many amazing activities for them from age 3 on, and it's great at the rec center, at this or whatever. There's coaching at young ages for all kinds of sports. Most sports have now gone year-round. Sports that were seasonal are now year-round. There's a practice or a training. So there's just not a lot of downtime for fun. Just to run around and fun, where no parents or coaches are telling you what you can and can't do. So looking for those opportunities. I know my parents were there. We got this big front yard, and he's like, nobody on your street is outside playing. I'm like, because they're all at a sport. So looking for when are those fun times. Once you've kind of set the field, that pregame, understanding, what does it look like? I talked really quickly about the sensory systems, but what does it look like? What does it look like when you're feeling just right? What does it look like when you're not? So being aware of what that looks like and feels like for you, and then also being aware, what does it look like and feel like for your child? When they're on, you have those moments where you're like, wow, he really handled that great. He was on. He jumped right in and took charge. Okay, that was that just right moment. What else was happening before then or going into that? So that you know what you can kind of help to promote. What does too much or not enough feel like? So when we go through those sensory systems, what does too much or over sensation with sound or touch or smell or movement, what does that look like for your child? You kind of have to put on your detective hat. Is your child one of those kiddos that as soon as they get to a birthday party, they are overwhelmed in 10 minutes? Because either the busyness of the amount of people, the sounds. I have some kiddos that they're fine until the happy birthday song. And then that's too much. All those people and all their lovely voices singing happy birthday in all kinds of tones, some kids screaming it, is just way too much stimulation for them. Maybe the thought of being bumped into at the party and there's so many people is too much. Or maybe it's too little. Maybe I need a lot of input. I under-register that input, so I'm going to run into the middle of that group and crash into everybody. Oops, I'm pushing the button on accident. So that I can get all the input I need. So what does that look like for your child? And we all have sensory preferences, so we all have those needs. Some people, need to get up in the morning and take a run, and they are not organized until that happens. And some people don't. It doesn't mean you have a sensory processing problem. It's just an awareness of what are your sensory needs. What fills your bucket or what fills their bucket? We want it full to the green line. We want it to the fill line, right? So what gets us to that? So if you're seeking information, what activities get you to the fill line without going over? But if you're real sensitive, what activities get you to the fill line and keep you there? And then what empties your bucket? When you're all the way in red and you're overdone and your bucket is spilling over, what are some activities that take you back down to green, that get you calm again, that get your child calm again when they're in a busy situation or overdone? And then what would be a great day and what would be a really tough day? When they're young, we're sort of looking at them and observing that for them. As they get older, pull them into that. What is a great day? If you could have your best day, what would it be? They can give you a lot of really good input. Yeah, you probably can't go to Cedar Point every day, but you can get input on okay, Cedar Point, and they really like the roller coasters. That's giving me some information about what their body likes. What is a really tough day? And again, I'm always amazed by my kids of things that they'll say. I'm like, I really didn't even know that was an issue. My daughter's a prime example. She's very outgoing, so I really didn't know. She's like, I'm really shy. It is so overwhelming for me to walk in a room where I don't know people. And she's so outgoing and lovely, I never even thought of that. But she's holding all that stress in, so when she walks into that situation, her bucket's here. So if anything happens, she's really feeling overdone. So what do? So some of the warm-ups, some of the sensory diet activities, and again, these are good for everybody, for all of us. They're not just for kids with sensory processing problems. They're not just for kids with a diagnosis. What are the things that we can do, since we've already put our detective hat on and identified, hey, this is overfilling my bucket. What are things that we can do to take it back down a notch? Heavy work. Heavy work activities are so calming, so relaxing. This is that push-pull. There's several handouts out there. I think there's a yellow one and there's a green one, and then there's also a white one. Lots of fun activities on there. Heavy work actually increases the serotonin in your brain and slows you down and gets you organized. Heavy work could be any kind of push-pull, okay? It also builds self-esteem. As soon as we start to realize, I can do something about this feeling that I have. I'm overwhelmed. and I'm feeling out of control, but I can control that. I can do something about it. We start increasing our self-esteem. We don't feel as helpless. Heavy work is the next thing over is proprioception, and heavy work is that proprioception. So it can be carrying groceries for you, it can be pushing, pulling, any of those kind of things. Movement is always a good activity for those kids that are seeking extra input. How can we get some really good movement input that helps you to stay calm, that helps you to stay focused? There's things you can do in the classroom as well as at home. Deep pressure input, one of my favorites. Hugs, squeezes, squishes between pillows, a lot of those kind of things. And I have a whole slide that will go over specific activities in a minute. Oral respiratory. Suck, swallow, breathe is one of the first things that we do as infants. It's calming. You think about it, an infant that's sucking from a bottle, they're calming, they're slowing down. We still need that. So how do we get that? What are some activities that we can do where we're sucking and swallowing, where we're chewing, we're crunching, we're kind of working on that calming with our mouth. And then also looking at our environment. When we have that situation, when your child is going to that birthday party or to that family party and everybody's trying to help out, auntie and grandma are really trying to help, but they're in your child's face and your child's already feeling overwhelmed, what are some environmental things that we can do to help them find a calm space, help them find a quiet thing? Can we take them to another room for a few minutes so that they can have some just one-on-one time with you and relax a little? Can we dim the lights? Can we take the volume down a notch? Some of those kind of things. Here's some of the specific things, and again, there's a lot on your sheet. These are some of my favorites. When we do sensory activities with a kid, there's a couple of really important things to remember. First of all, it's not forced. We want their buy-in. If somebody forces you to do a workout, it's not relaxing. It's not calming. It might be kind of annoying. You're sort of PO'd at that person. So we want their buy-in. So with kids, it's really easy. We just need to make it fun. And we have their buy-in. And then anything that they really like, a character, a theme, pull that in. That's your carrot. If they like Dora the Explorer, then you get a backpack and you put a weight in it and you're going on an adventure. And you're going on an adventure in your house if the weather's bad, and you're going on an adventure outside if it's good. And you're learning stuff. We're going to go outside. We're going to find an acorn and a rock and a leaf and a stick. And we're going to put it in our backpack that already has a phone book in it. Great activity, great one-on-one time with your child, very calming. In your house, you can do that too. You can do an I Spy. Let's go around the house with our special backpack on and do an I Spy. Pulling your friend or a sibling around on either if you're outside in a wagon, or if you're inside on a blanket. If you've got hardwood floors or pergo or something, have one of them sit on the blanket, yank them around the room, come back, have the next one do it. And you can talk about it being some sort of adventure or race. Building a fort. I don't know about you guys, but my kids, they're older now, but our family room looked like a fort most days. At the end of the day, we put everything back. Haul out all the pillows, the couch cushions, the blankets, all that heavy stuff. Have them do the heavy work. Set it up. Sometimes they didn't even play in it that much. They just got so much out of setting it up. And it was just fun to have this cool space to go into. Let them have at it. Watering plants with a heavy water can when it starts getting nice. Or pulling the hose from that hose wheel and then holding the squeezer. Great heavy work stuff. All those front end loaders for washers, dryers. Perfect. Have them pull all that wet laundry out of the dryer into the basket, slide it over, shove it back into the dryer. Kids, a lot of times at young ages, love helping mom and dad, right? And this is a way they can help you with your laundry, and they could also get the input they need. Pushing all the chairs in at the table. Purposely leave them really far out. Could you please push all the chairs while mommy's doing the dishes? Gives them a job, gives them some extra stuff. Carrying heavy books. Oh, can you take this to the family room? Vacuuming. Would it be nice to have them vacuum a little bit? Stapling, 3-hole punchers. Those are great things. They can staple all over a paper. It's amazing how many kids cannot push all the way down to get the staple going with the 3-hole punch. Great heavy work. Crunchy snacks, chewy snacks, anything to get those jaw joints engaged. That's going to give you calming input. Sucking something thick through a straw, so a milkshake, or I've done yogurt on a plate or in a bowl, or applesauce, and have them suck it off. They think that's hilarious, and it's a great way to calm down. There's also a fun little tic-tac-toe game. So if you just make a tic-tac-toe on a piece of paper, and you have small pieces of paper with X's and O's, and you use your straw, and you have to suck in and pick up the X or O, and then drop it on the paper, and you can play tic-tac-toe. If you notice your child is in the yellow, hey, let's play tic-tac-toe. And you start that game, by the time you're done with all that sucking and blowing, it's gone. They're calmed down already. Push-ups, brain gym, yoga, movement exercises, all those kind of things. There's several in the paper as well, some geared for small spaces, some geared for classrooms. So there's a lot of ideas for you.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the pregame kinds of stuff, like developing that understanding and some of the organizing input strategies, and we're talking about warming up. But if you remember, think back to the title of this talk or to the description of this talk, we're really focused on helping our kids. They may be young right now, but we want to help them as they grow to figure out how they can manage this stuff for themselves without you having to, squeeze applesauce out onto a plate, pour applesauce onto a plate and have them say, because that's not always a very natural kind of thing in many different settings. But we want to use these strategies along with the plan and the understanding so that they can start putting some of these things in place for themselves as they grow. And so a big part of that, I think, is the understanding piece. And if in the understanding piece, we've got a kid who they like to know what's expected, and those unexpected things fill their bucket, we spend a lot of time on getting comfortable and teaching kids how they can get themselves comfortable in some of those unexpected situations. One thing we might do is try to put some structure and predictability where we can, so that they understand kind of what's going to happen most of the time. We can also, so the hidden curriculum is something that it's a wide area of work. If you Google the hidden curriculum, you'll come up with a bazillion different scripts, really. They are social rules that we all follow, but no one tells you. And so there are hidden curriculums for, elementary age kids. There are hidden curriculums for adults. There are hidden curriculums for the workplace, for dating, for online activities. There's all kinds of different hidden curriculums. But the general idea of that is, like we talked about something like an elevator. There's no sign outside the elevator door that says, as you enter the elevator and there are strangers with you, please each of you back up into a corner and face the elevator doors. But people all enter the elevator the same way, right? If you're by yourself, you can stand sort of wherever, but then if somebody else comes in, you kind of back into a corner. Somebody else comes in, they go into another corner. Nobody turns around and stands this way in an elevator, but we never learn those kinds of things. There's a lot of hidden curriculum with, urinal behavior and stuff like that. I understand. But so if you've got a kid who likes to know what is expected, there are, from a social perspective, curricula out there that will help you teach your kid what is expected in those different situations. But also getting facts. So if you've got somebody who a birthday party makes them kind of squirrely or anxious, or they're walking into a birthday party here and they're going to Sky Zone for a birthday party, guess what? Those birthday parties are pretty much routine and predictable, and there is probably some YouTube video that walks through a birthday party at Sky Zone, so you can go ahead and get some facts, through the although make sure you watch some of those YouTube videos before you do it with a kid, because rookie mistake, you can get surprised sometimes with stuff you don't really want them to see. But you can also make some smart guesses. So sometimes if we take sort of the birthday party example, kids will ask their parents a lot of questions that their parents have no possible way of knowing the answers to. Like, what do you think we're going to have for dinner? I don't know. It didn't say, sometimes on the invitation it'll say, we'll have pizza and cake. Other times it'll say, we'll serve dinner or something like that. You can say, I don't know, but what do you think usually people have at birthday parties? So you can we all kind of understand there is some routine and some predictability in a lot of these social kinds of things. Maybe pizza, I don't know, but you can kind of teach them how to make some smart guesses. And then also creating a story or planning for how to figure out what is expected. So like, for example, if they don't, I worked with a kid who was anxious about adults asking her questions at a birthday party, like, do you want, chocolate or vanilla instead of, like a cupcake or something like that. So we kind of came up with, well, what kinds of things might people ask? So that's making smart guesses, and then we created a story for how she could respond to that. Creating stories, especially for younger kids, but it's useful for older kids, helps them to sort of learn what to expect in a different situation and kind of play it out that way. We can practice transitions. We can build in observation time. So figuring out how, if you're talking about like a birthday party or a practice or something like that, how can you sort of sit on the sidelines, get a little information, observe, look around, make some smart guesses, get yourself calm, and then join in. For practices, there are a lot of kids who, once the structured drill is in place, those kids are fine, but they don't do well with the before the official practice starts and kids are just pairing off together, passing the soccer ball around or whatever. And so they do things, maybe they do silly things, or maybe they are crying, maybe they won't get out of the car or something like that. You can teach them like, hey, let's go to the field and your shoes aren't tied. And so now you'll just kneel down on the side of the field, tie your shoes, but while you're doing that, you can kind of look around and see, oh, those people are passing the ball to each other. Oh, that's what's happening over here. So you're getting a little bit of information, but you're doing it kind of on your own speed. Okay, so you've identified triggers, now you want to figure out your system. There are lots and lots of systems out there that you can find on Pinterest and Google and all sorts of things easily. A lot of schools use a system that you might hear about. The Incredible 5-point scale is a popular one. The zones of regulation is popular. A lot of just classrooms have like some sort of, it's like a traffic light sort of thing, you know, like green, yellow, and red for behavior management or something along those lines. I wouldn't necessarily say that one is better than the other. It really sometimes depends on that individual and how it best fits into your life. But there are some commonalities about all of these different systems. So that's the important part. The commonalities are really labeling those zones or those levels or those sort of the escalating behavior. So labeling it, identifying, I think this part is really important. What the kid can do at that level. So let's say in the Incredible 5-point scale, a 1 is like you're calm, you're good, a 5 is you're out of control. So if you're at a 3, what can you do, if you're talking to a kid, you know, what can the kid do when they're at a 3 to stay at a 3 or come down to a 2? What can the grown-ups around you do to help you stay at a 3 or go down to a 2? And that everybody then understands that plan and follows that plan. So everyone knows what they're going to do. When you have this plan, it also helps with that predictability because the kid knows, okay, when I do ask for a break, they're going to tell me okay. Oftentimes, stop talking is on that adult side of what can they do. Adults just not asking any more questions or talking to a kid who's escalating. So in the game plan, then you're going to try to figure out your plays. So you're going to, and you're also going to decide on how to call them. So this is more like the in-the-moment dealing with situations. So let's say, okay, going to a birthday party or something again, or a bouncy house, you know, 4th of July party, somebody's got a bouncy house, and you know your kid is the one who's getting in trouble for punching people and tackling them. Somebody's going to be hurt if they're in the bouncy house with your kid. So you might, and you've already done all that pregame work where you've really understood and helped your kid understand that they get excited in those situations or overstimulated. Then you're coming up with a script with them. You're having a conversation, of course, at their developmental level, but something along the lines of, okay, we know you're the kind of kid who sometimes gets really excited in a bouncy house. If it feels like your bucket is getting too full, you can just say, I'm going to go get a drink. You're giving them an out. You know, you're helping them also with that sense of identifying what's going on inside of me, but then you're telling them exactly what they can do when they feel that way. So I'm going to go get a drink. Now, if I notice that it looks like your bucket is getting kind of full, because I know what it looks like, we already did all that pregame work about what does it look like, what does it, you know, feel like for you, what does it look like to other people, what are the clues that we have that you're escalating. If I notice it looks like your bucket is getting too full, I'll say, hey, can you come here for a second? You'll know you're not getting in trouble, right? Because of course that's what kids think when they're in a bouncy house and they see the finger calling them over, they think they're going to get in trouble or something. So you see, you'll know you're not in trouble. I just want to give you a chance to check in about your bucket so you can stay just right. Because kids feel good when they're just right. They don't feel good when they're up here, and they don't feel good when they're down there. So you're coming up with this plan and helping them figure out what are sort of your outs. Okay, so the game plan in that section, so this is again those levels that you're coming up with. You know, you're talking to the kid, what can the kid do when they're at those levels to stay where they are or get calm? Sometimes talking to somebody about it, telling somebody, hey, I'm at a 4. Just identifying that can be helpful. Taking a break. Breaks look different for different kids. It could be actually like a movement break. It could be getting out of the situation. It could be like that necklace that Chris was talking about. That kid would just put the necklace on when she was like, I know I'm going to yell at you and get in trouble if you ask me any more questions. And it was a reminder. The reason why we did the necklace was because the mom was like, I can't help it. I just keep asking her questions, and I'm trying not to, but I forget, you know. And so it was sort of a reminder for the mom that she's in a place where she really can't take another question. Getting clarification. So sometimes kids don't know what they're supposed to do or what's expected of them. Teaching them how to ask for help or clarification. Asking for what you need or want. So and sometimes kids will do this. They'll say, do I have to go to Target with you? Do I have to go? I'm tired, I just want to go home. And we often hear that as a complaint, you know, but when we turn it around to, okay, this is my kid asking me or telling me what they need, then you can think about, you know, we really need such and such, and you can kind of sort it out with them, but you know that that's not going to be a Target trip where you're going up and down every aisle trying to get more and more time out of them. You're like, I'm going to just get exactly what we need, right? So you kind of can teach that sort of thing. That blends into the problem solving. So here's what your problem is, here's what my problem is, how can we figure out how to make this work together? And then Chris mentioned a lot of the sensory kinds of strategies that kids can do to help themselves. What can others do? So WAIT stands for why am I talking? And a teacher told me that she thinks of that a lot of kids just hear so much language all the time. You know, why am I talking? Is there a reason why? Did the kid not pick up the book bag, and so now I need to say pick it up? They can give a child a break, whether that's you know, an obvious sort of break, like why don't you just you can take a break right now, you don't need to keep going with your homework, or it might be that you just stop demanding things from them, or you reduce the demands for a little period of time. But you're also understanding and validating and helping them label and identify, working on problem solving. You're providing those sensory supports. And I really do think that the talking for some kids when they're usually at like a 4 or 5 is really going to send them over the edge. When somebody's trying to get them to calm down, oftentimes that just makes things worse. So of course you have to understand that about your kid. All right, so making game time decisions then, you're going to be monitoring what's going on because you've already identified what it looks like and what it feels like at different levels. So you're kind of keeping an eye on, is my kid giving me clues and cues that they're just right or a little under or a little over? You're going to adjust as needed or put a strategy in place as needed. You can take a timeout. We say not that kind of timeout. We're not talking about like, you're 5, so now you need 5 minutes on the step, like a behavior, you know, timeout from positive reinforcement. We're talking about just sort of like a calming down time, where you go get yourself calm and come back. And adults or children, so sometimes parents need to take that time out too when they're feeling stressed, and that's a good way to model self-regulation and getting calm. Tagging out, so if you have support, if you've got a spouse or a partner or a grandparent or a neighbor nearby or somebody who could just sort of take over at certain ages or with certain personality kids, you know they will listen to a babysitter or just pretty much anybody else more than their own parent. And if you're escalating, that's not going to help the situation, so it can help you stay calm. And then recovering is really important. So making sure that you might have to go back and address the situation, but that everybody is calm. You've had a chance to recover from the moment, and your kid has had a chance to recover from the moment. There is no I in team. So what I end up hearing a lot from families when we go over a lot of this sort of pregame stuff and the understanding is they're like, I totally get it and I want to do this, but we run into a problem that my kid is really irritated when his brother makes noises, but I can't force his brother to stop making noises because sometimes it's just like when his brother talks, it's not even like, and we have to let him talk, he can't. So the world doesn't really revolve around my kid all the time, and I'm happy to make some adjustments, but really, how does this work in a family or in a classroom when the things that fill your bucket are listening to someone talk or breathe or whatever? So we have to figure out, how do we work together? How do you make those plans? And so sometimes, absolutely, that you've got other people in the family, they can't just be expected to never breathe or speak. But what kinds of things can that kid do? Can they put headphones on? What kinds of distracting things? Or, the other siblings like, well, I'll try not to sing in the kitchen. I'll sing in my bedroom or whatever. But coming up with plans, just actually talking about it is helpful. And we want to avoid putting responsibility on one person. So that's my pitch for the sibling who's a little bit more tolerant and has a higher threshold. Oftentimes that sibling is kind of like, can you just deal with it, because you know what's going to happen if his bucket overflows. And we don't really want to put that responsibility on one person. But this, I call it a culture of consideration. So just, we're a family, and we try to do things to help each other feel good in our house. So these are some of the things that we can do to help each other feel good. And where it's just as a family and not because your brother loses it when his bucket is overflowed. We don't want to send that message. All right, so we are going to also spend a little time reviewing the tapes. This is just after the fact. When there's been a problem, you go over the situation. So what happened? What could we have done differently? Helps you revise your understanding if needed. It helps you to problem solve for future problems. And it can help you practice the preferred responses. You want to make sure you're being a coach, a good coach, not a referee. Because we want our kids to be able to do this on their own. Part of that is visualizing the goal. Athletes talk a lot of times about seeing themselves scoring or achieving that, and that's what we want to help our kids do too, is see what sort of the done picture looks like or what successful looks like. We're going to be transferring the responsibility and ownership bit by bit. So with a younger kid, where you're really being able to tell that their bucket is filling, you might be putting some of the sensory strategy or the organizing strategies in place for them. But we really want to move towards, hey, it looks like you might be getting a little irritated. You think you might want to do that, or whatever version works for your kid. But where we are not just instructing and prompting all the time, where they're learning, this is what I need from myself. And some of that can come from reviewing the tapes as you go through that. We're going to allow for some frustrations because we do want our kids to develop a tolerance for frustration. We don't want to just jump in and they say, instead of, people have heard about helicopter parents, the newest term, have you heard the newest term is lawnmower parents? You know what that is? You plow everything, smooth everything over for them. We don't want to do that. We do want to make sure we're providing genuine and honest and specific praise for our kids when they've handled the situation well. So at this point, we will open it up for questions and hopefully be able to put this all together for you.
So our question was, with the heavy work activities, do you do those before? Do you do those in the moment? So some of both. So when we talk about a sensory diet, we talk about having little stints of stuff that we're going to do before a situation that we know is stressful. So, and we've already sort of hopefully at this point identify like, wow, really carrying the backpack or pulling their sister helps them calm down. So that means you're going to walk into that stressful situation in green instead of in yellow. And so it's still going to take you up. It's still maybe a stressful situation for you or your child. And so then you want to have a couple of opportunities or a couple, I call, tricks in your bag of here's some things when we're in the moment that I can do. And again, making them things that would be something normal, like come over and give me a big bear hug, those type of things. And that links into that awareness that you were talking about in that game plan. So that if you can set the stage, if you can walk in at your most calm level, whatever comes at you, you're going to handle a lot better. Because it builds. It really does. If you think about your day and you think about a day where you had good sleep and you had something for breakfast and you're feeling good and your morning went well, and then something happens, you're handling it like this. If you had a morning where the alarm clock didn't go off, your kid is sick, the breakfast burned, and you're flying out the door, whatever comes across you, and it might not even be something that would normally trigger you, you are like, you're exploding at that person, you're commenting maybe more curtly than you would, so absolutely before, and then have a bag of tricks of things you can do during. Music's also really helpful, and I didn't talk a lot about that, but having some music on your phone, there's lots of apps, there's just so many different things. So having that in the background, if you've got somebody that doesn't like the way their brother talks, and that's bothering them, or I had one young lady who no one in the house could have ice in their glass because that clinking of the ice was really, from an auditory standpoint, annoying. So, but then maybe having some other white noise so you don't hear that, so it sort of blends over. So there are some in-the-moment things as well. Great question. Other questions or scenarios that people have for coping skills or the sensory things or...
What do I do when my child refuses to tell me about his day? His teacher confirms that he's doing well in school, but no matter how many times I ask, he refuses to tell me about his day.
That's not unusual at all for a kid to not really want to talk about their school day or to just say good or fine or something like that. I think, monitor it, I guess, but don't jump to the conclusion that something bad is happening and that's why he's like hiding it from you. It could just be he's 4.5 and he doesn't feel like talking about school. He's in the moment right now and wants to play with what he's playing with. So some of the things you can do is instead of asking him like, how was your day, you might ask more specific kinds of things or...
do that and he's like, oh, I played.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you want to like switch from having it be like an interview to more like natural kinds of conversation. So it sometimes I think for kids it feels like they're being interviewed, like, what'd you do? I played. Who'd you play with? Friends. Okay, what did you guys do? And so we pile on, instead of just kind of like giving a little space and trying to figure out, a lot of times I'll just repeat what a kid has said, so I might not ask a question, but if they're playing and they say something like, we have that at school, I might say something like, oh, you have this kind of thing at school? And then the next thing you know, they add on, like, we do, but except ours are colorful. And then you're like, oh, okay, so do you like to build with these, or what do you like to do with it? So it's more natural instead of now I've got to report what I've just done at school. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I had one other thing to add to that as well. Just sometimes if you start to share what you did, oh, well, you were at school today. I did da-da-da-da-da. Sometimes it starts the conversation and it takes that pressure off of you're asking me, oh, you shared something. I should probably share something. So sometimes coming around the back door helps as well.
I don't know if your 4.5 boy is like a 4.5 boy, but sometimes they like things that are gross.
Yeah.
So you could ask too, like, what was the grossest thing you saw today? Or like stuff like that. So kind of get into like what they like to talk about or what they notice, and you can try that approach. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So her question was sometimes when her kids get overloaded, they don't want to be touched and stuff, and that's not uncommon. Are they the type of children that are not big on touch in the first place? Or are they okay with getting dirty and messy and squeezes and touch and stuff like that, but just when I'm overdone, I don't want touch? So what I try to do is find ways that they can do the input without my hands being on them. So sometimes we do, I'm the and I'm going to push the wall over, and all of us are pushing the wall over. Or I do have some families that'll do almost like a chin-up bar, those ones you can hang in your doorway, and just hanging on that chin-up bar and have, who can hang for 10 seconds? Oh, who can hang for 20 seconds? Oh, getting that input actively on their own, where we're coaching them through it, but we're not actually putting hands on. Because when I think about it, when I am really annoyed and my husband comes in to give me a hug, like, really not a good idea. You don't want to touch this right now. So I think they're saying that too. So then having some of those other things where they can push-pull. A lot of times we'll just even have heavy stuff that they can, in our office, a lot of times we'll put a whole bunch of heavy things on a chair and they're just shoving it around. I'm a steamroller and I'm steamrolling all this stuff down, having some things they can knock down the hallway. Those are great things.
Did you say that your kids would prefer to be in like a blank room without any stimulation? Because then
that's okay too.
Yeah. So I would just make that a part of that plan. When there's too much going on, I'm gonna go under a blanket, and that's your sign, Mom, to not touch me, not do anything.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And some people will use those small pop-up tents. And so they'll have that in one corner of the room, and they can put whatever they want in there. And when I need to go in there, I'm in my pop-up tent, and I'm calm. It's not a timeout tent. It is I need a minute.
And then for older kids, so this, I see a lot of kids who are at the age where they can kind of stay home by themselves if they wanted to. And so parents get really concerned that the kids don't want to come to the neighborhood block party, or they don't want to go to grandma's house for dinner or something like that. And a lot of times when we are doing some of the problem solving, the older kids will be able to say, I just don't want to talk to all those people. It's too much. There's all these different foods, or there's all this stuff going on. And parents get really concerned about their kids being antisocial. And so we try to come up with, whether let's say it's just a neighborhood kind of thing, and so the kid can come out and be a part of it for what you set up, whatever the expectation is. And then when they're like, okay, I've had enough, I'm going to go home, they're allowed to say that. But the important part of when I talk about here's what I'm going to do and here's what you're going to do, and adults kind of have to follow that plan. What I think adults end up accidentally doing is trying to convince a kid to stay longer. So a lot of times our kids are telling us that their bucket is full, and we're like, I know, but can you please stay a little bit longer? Or they invited us here for dinner and they haven't served the dinner yet, just stay. And then a lot of times it's trouble. They do something to end up getting sent home, which is exactly where they wanted to be in the first place or whatever, So sometimes for older kids, we come up with a plan that might include bringing a book, and you're allowed to just go off and read. And parents get concerned that then their kid's going to look rude or whatever. And so we just talk about how do we make that plan so that it's acceptable and appropriate.
Another parent asks, what are the words that you use when trying to explain to friends, and particularly family, when you are allowing your child to step away for a sensory break or to read when they're at a public function? What kind of words do you use to explain that sort of behavior?
So if they're criticizing you, I always think that when we have that understanding and we have a plan, it helps us feel more in control as parents. We say, yeah, it's something we've been working on. He knows that when he comes to the parties, he's going to be engaged and hanging out for a while, but at a certain point it gets just to be too much for him, and so that's when I told him, yeah, hey, you're allowed to go and chill by yourself, that's fine. So I think almost if you have a very casual and matter of fact, but I think that when you have the plan and you have the understanding and you know why you're doing something, you feel a lot more confident than. But don't you think he's just never going to want to get to, be with people if he does that? And you're like, not really, because he's learning how to keep himself just right. He's learning how to keep himself calm. And by the way, there are plenty of adults who know that, okay, if I am going to such and such party tonight or whatever, I'm going to leave. I'm going to have an excuse of why I need to leave. And I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to read,
Right.
So those are things that adults do. We just want to teach them how to be more, teach our kids how to be socially appropriate when they need to regulate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Parent asks, what do you do or how do you help your child when they don't realize that they're becoming overstimulated, perhaps at a birthday party if they're sensory seeking, and then they're really resistant to leaving that sensory seeking activity? How do you help them recognize the cues that they are becoming sensory overstimulated and their bucket is getting too full?
Right, so I think that's a combination of things. I think it's, going back to that game plan and figuring out what are his signals before he gets to the pushing part, where he's sort of letting you know, ooh, I'm amping up. I may be hitting, this beginning part of yellow. I'm not pushing yet, but I'm starting to get, you can kind of see it as a parent. You see it coming. And so having that signal of like, hey, come get a drink of water, or hey, that kind of thing. This isn't a you have to go. This is a check-in, come get a drink of water. And maybe you can even walk over, even if he doesn't want to be like touched or, you can go over somewhere and do something heavy, or you can, if you're at a party, he can help. Hey, could you help me put these books away? And then, go, or can you help me push all the chairs in for Aunt Margaret before we go back to that? And so having a couple of things that you feel like he could do that would be a heavy work activity, using the signal of I see that you need this need, and we kind of have a signal back and forth, come get a drink of water, and then having those heavy work activities that you can build in. And then ideally, as she was saying, the goal is as they get older, they're going to notice like, ooh, I'm feeling this way. I need to excuse myself for a minute and I can come back later.
And a second part to this question is, what do you do when your child becomes physical or aggressive when you're trying to remove them from a situation where their bucket is getting too full?
So when you're trying to pull and disengage, now you're seeing some of this stuff at you, because of course you've been the person to initiate, like, hey, I see this. So a couple of things you can do with that is the reason for coming out, or the coming out could be something, if he has a special type of, if he likes Paw Patrol or he likes whatever, have it related to that. Have it not mom's asking you, but ooh, let's do this Paw Patrol adventure. Maybe even if there's a family member or a peer that would be enjoy that as well, maybe two of them could come and do this extra little adventure that is going to be a little calming. So it's not about you, and it's not you saying, I'm pulling you out to push you back in. It's more of I'm engaging you in some other task that's really fun that's going to come back around to the group. So kind of putting that hat on of, what else could we make that would be interesting and exciting and make you want to? Anything that we can do that's intrinsic is going to be certainly more well received than stuff that's pulled out.
He might be a little young for this, but kind of along the lines of reviewing the tapes. So I'll do a lot of drawing, like comic strips, basically. So you kind of draw out what happened. So we were at Sky Zone, or we were wherever, and you were doing this, and okay, some kids are more verbal about and engaged in what they were thinking or what they were feeling, but you're just trying to get like the basics of what happened. And then I saw, oh man, he's starting to get kind of overexcited, or however you're going to label it with him. He's starting to get to a 5, he's starting to get red, or whatever you want to call it. So I said, our plan is, for me to but I think, and then you're drawing all this stuff out, when I came, maybe you were thinking, no, I don't want to get out of here. You weren't thinking about the plan. You were thinking about staying, and then what happened? You hit me, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so then what happened? So you're kind of playing out like the natural consequences of that, like maybe then we had to leave or whatever. And how did you feel when we left? And so you're asking him how he felt when you had to leave the place. If you're like dragging him and he's kicking and screaming and all this stuff. And mommy felt grumpy, and I was, so you're kind of getting into how did it play out? But then if you take, Post-it notes or you're an eraser or something like that, but you try to draw out, okay, so what was our plan again? You were going to come out and get some water. Okay, so I wonder what would have happened. Let's draw that and see what would have happened. So if you came out, you got your water, maybe your bucket got down, or however you're going to label it, you're calmer, and then what would happen? Then you could go back and play. Okay, and then how would you feel? So you're helping him to try to see that intrinsic, like why the plan would help me because I could stay here longer. He might be a little young for that, but that's okay.
He's not.
Maybe another 4 minutes. Yeah. So that would be the kind of thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
A mom asks, what do I do when my preschool-age child continually gets sent home or gets in trouble for being too physical at school because of sensory processing behaviors? When his bucket is getting too full, his teachers don't recognize that it is a sensory-related behavior. How to help teachers become more familiar with some of these sensory behaviors.
Right, and a lot of times, if in a typical preschool situation, they may not understand that this isn't just behavior, it could be sensory related, and so there might be a different approach. And so sometimes when kids are doing the pushing and pulling, it can actually be either or. Maybe you're somebody who's very zoomy and needs a lot of input, and you get more and more excited as you get going. But also some kids are overly sensitive and they're doing the pushing and pulling because when we start looking all the way deep down, like we're really sensitive to sound, so now I'm already overdone in this room, or we're really sensitive to sight or touch. So they could be on either end, and the strategies are a little bit different. So it's really kind of getting in there and figuring out what is the piece that's really causing that overstimulation and causing that, kind of that acting out. Am I seeking input and that's why I'm pushing into everybody, or am I like, you are all, I'm feeling closed in and claustrophobic here, and so I just need to get everybody out of my space. So trying to find some of those strategies. Generally, in occupational therapy, we can take a look at some of those sensory issues, and then, sharing some of the strategies that are on the sheets that we gave you. The other thing is sharing with some of the preschool teachers, even on the back table, there's like the out of sync child, or the out of sync child has fun. Just starting to help other people have an understanding that there often is more at the root of what they're seeing. All they're seeing is the behavior. So there's often more at the root, and that can be addressed and approached in a little bit different way. And sometimes if you just understand that, you're much more just calm and your approach is different versus just a stop it, and you look through different glasses. You see them in a very different way. You're like, oh, he's overwhelmed again, the poor kid, versus, oh, he's pushing people again. It's a very different feel. Do you have more to add to that? Or
I mean, you might also be able to get some support from your school district too. So you might ask for the school district at the preschool level to do an evaluation and see if they can put some services in place either at the preschool where your son already is, or some school districts have like an integrated preschool program where he might be able to go to that preschool where he could get some services too, if
that's what he
if he needs that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
So I'm kind of confused if my 4-year-old daughter is...
A mom asks, how do you approach it when you have two siblings that have very different sensory needs? Do you sit down and have those conversations about a game plan together with the children, or should you do it separately?
Personally, I think if they talk to each other well, and you can do it together. I also think it doesn't really matter, because if you start talking to them together and you realize we're getting nowhere with this, then you'll just divide and conquer. Or if, I don't think it, don't think too much about that.
Right, and some of the sensory activities that they'll do, the actual activity is similar, but the way they'll do it is different. So if you have somebody who's seeking and you're doing a movement activity, or you're doing fast move back, forth, but somebody who is not wanting, as much input, they're going to want the same activity, but it's slow and rhythmical and stuff. So sometimes you can use the same activity in a different way, so yes, exactly. Yeah, great question.
A mom asks, what do you do when you're going into a situation where you can't exactly anticipate what sort of sensory challenges there might be? For instance, at a Cub Scout meeting, you can't really anticipate whether or not a peer or another child will do something that will set her child off. So what sorts of tools or tips can she go into this meeting or into a social setting with that can help be a calm down technique for her child?
Yeah, I think that you can make a plan for the unexpected. Sometimes we're going to be places and we don't really know what's going to happen. When that happens, here's what we're going to do. So you can kind of build that into it. But as far as how do you kind of pull him away to help him get calmer, some of that I think depends on him a little bit and how you normally interact. And so, there are some kids who like, a physical gesture or something, and they know that it's your secret signal or your secret code, and they will come over for that. There are other kids who like to, they'll give you a look, something like that, and then you kind of, and then you can kind of give that look back, I know, but you're just going to deal with it, and kind of kind of shrug it off or whatever. So I think that a lot of that is handled still in the pregame and the reviewing the tapes when you're so what happened? And then you're identifying what were the problems, what do you think we could have done to make that better, and then you come up with another pregame. Does that make sense?
And I think the other piece is you can't always anticipate, whenever you go, there is going to be something. So I think really trying to get into how does it feel? Because that feeling will occur across environments, across situations. So when I'm feeling X, Y, Z, I know I need this. And so that's where that kind of getting some sort of either zones of regulation or scale where he can start having a better understanding of this is how I'm feeling. And so here's 3 things I can do. And that can be done in any situation. And it can be walk away and take a drink. It could be go over and tell my mom something. It can be, I have kids that carry a squeeze ball or a stress ball or something. It can be, if there's stairs, go run up the stairs and down the stairs, come back. But being in tune with how you feel, because you're right, there's so many ups and downs of daily life, and you go through so many scenarios, you would have pages of things. So, really trying to get to that, how do I feel? And I really encourage parents to verbalize how they're feeling as you go through different things, like, wow, I am really feeling angry right now, I'm going to walk out and do this. That really is so powerful to kids because they are watching us all the time. And we don't even realize. And so we're showing that example of how I handled it. Because usually we just handle it and we don't even show anything. So sometimes kids don't even think, oh, you don't even get frustrated. I'm like, are you kidding me? I am up and down all day. And here's what I do. And I think that makes them feel better too. Like, oh, it's not just me. You and you and you and you all feel this way. And you're doing something every time. Yeah. Welcome to life, So, and hopefully there's some things on that activity, but sometimes it's just something squishy, something squeezy. Have them buy into it. I have a couple kids. Have you ever seen those worry stones? They're sort of a little smooth stone. Those are great. You can have that right in your pocket. They're smooth, and you can just be rubbing that like that kid really rubs me raw. And I'm rubbing this worry stone, and just take it down a notch. Some kids don't. Some kids, if they know it's going to be stressful, they chew gum through the whole Boy Scout thing. I'm just chewing it out, big lead chew, any of that kind of stuff. Yeah, great question.
You had a question?
I did, yes. My son.
A mom asks, how can she help her child better self-identify when his bucket is getting too full or when he might be getting to a place where he's having trouble with impulse control and making the right choice? He's usually very calm at home, but when he's at school, he's been making decisions that are based in a place of not being just right.
This book wasn't on the resource list, but there's a book called What Were You Thinking? And it's about really impulsivity, and it talks about, it's a children's book, there's a 3rd grader, but I think younger kids could still get it, but it talks about just making those impulsive kind of decisions, whether it's calling out or eating cupcakes that are sitting out or throwing a ball at somebody's head in gym class. But so those kinds of books can be helpful, but also, like I said, kind of drawing things out. But what you would focus on with the drawing it out is, okay, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Instead of asking, why did you do that? Because a lot of times that's what we ask. It's more like when you were in that moment, okay, what were you thinking or how are you feeling? If he's not a draw it out kind of kid, I would just act it out. Mm-hmm. So you're like, okay, so tell me, you were here, and then what? Not in a, you're going to get in trouble. Like this is your trouble discussion. It's more like, what was happening so we can help you make those better choices. And he might say, I don't know what, I'm not in control of my brain when I do that. Or, he might say something like that, which is fine, and he is in control of his brain, and you'll help him learn how to take some deep breaths or things like that. There are some kids who, they will try something, and so you can teach them something, whether it's taking a deep breath or some of the sensory kinds of things, and say, well, I wonder if you try that next time, let's see what would happen. Okay. The whole concept in that What Were You Thinking book is like, when you did that, did it make it better or worse? And so you have to sort of stop and think, what will make this better or worse? Okay. So you kind of can go there. Was there a question up here too? Okay, no, we needed it. Okay.
There's another book too, The Volcano Inside Me. So that's another really good book to read with children, just to kind of go through, and that explains it.
And the last question, Mom asks how to help her son focus when trying to do homework. She has 2 other children and can't quite control the space in order to make it a sensory comfortable environment for him to be able to focus and get his homework done.
Sure. So a lot of times kids are overly sensitive or are much more aware of sounds and sights. A couple of simple things that we've done with kiddos, we've actually find a favorite baseball cap of either a game or whatever, if they like the Cavs, if they like the Browns, if they like the Indians, and having that on their head, the little bit of pressure of that, plus just kind of gives you more of a, hey, everything we're looking at is down here, if he would wear a hat. So that sometimes is really helpful. Sometimes looking at what are the sounds in the room. Is the TV on in the other room? Like I know for myself, if I'm in the dining room doing paperwork and the TV's on in the family room, I cannot concentrate. So looking at, is there a space that's away from where other siblings are playing or listening to the TV show or something like that? Using things like very organizing music, classical, Mozart, Vivaldi, something like that, played really almost at a white noise level so that it's just real organizing to kind of help him sit. Looking at what is the chair and the desk and table like that he's sitting at. Is he sitting at a regular dining room table, so the table's up to here on him and his feet are dangling? Is there some options to get him at something that really supports his body better? At a child-sized table, or can we boost him up a little bit? And then one other thing that I use a lot in the classrooms, but I also use at home, is taking, that exercise TheraBand that, adults use for exercises, and figure eighting that across the legs of the chair, it gives them a footrest if their feet don't reach the ground, but it gives them something to push on and 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 push on the whole time they're sitting still. And that can be really organizing. What I find is when the kids first get it, they push on it a ton. I mean, to the point that you're like, oh my God. And then I had one kiddo, first day I gave it to her in school, broke it. She pushed on it that much. But each day, then it just kind of became, oh, that's something to push on and less of a novelty, and it was just very helpful. So those are some kind of just simple, quick things that you could add into having kind of doing a little bit of physical stuff before you have them sit down, or having like that snack where you're drinking a smoothie or having a crunchy snack so that you're getting some input there too can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.